The sky was a hard, merciless blue, the kind that made the world feel too wide. Wind slid low across the prairie, carrying the scent of burnt mesquite and distant storm. She lay in the dirt, one hand clutched to her side, blood dark and sticky beneath her fingernails. Her dress, once sky-colored, now clung to her like wet bark. Her mouth tasted of copper and grit. Somewhere nearby, a raven cackled. She didn't scream. Screaming wasted breath. The child inside her shifted, slow and heavy like a stone underwater. She blinked against the sun, squinting toward the wavering edge of the horizon. Nothing. Just yellow grass and the long ache of distance. She was alone. No horse. No canteen. No shadow of mercy on the open land. He'd left her there. He'd told her he needed to fetch water, just a short walk to the spring. She'd watched him go, his boots silent against the soil, the rifle across his back catching the light. She'd believed him. A foolish thing, belief. She felt it now like a knife in her gut, worse than the bruises, worse than the bleeding. The ache in her belly flared sharp, and for a moment, she wasn't sure which pain belonged to her and which to the child. She pressed her palm against her stomach, whispering something small, something desperate. She wasn't sure if it was a promise or a prayer. She began to crawl. The ground was cracked and hot. Her elbows skinned open quickly, but she kept moving. Inches. Feet. Her breath came ragged. Flies gathered. She tasted the salt of her own tears, but didn't feel them fall. Above her, the sun watched without pity. Her thoughts unraveled into fragments, faces, sounds. The last time he touched her with something that might have been love. Or maybe she'd imagined it. Hours passed, maybe more. Time turned into a slow, circling buzz. Her body was failing. She knew that. But the child wasn't done yet. And neither was she. Then shadows. She blinked hard, certain it was just the edge of her mind splitting open. But no. There was movement. A figure standing against the light. He didn't speak, just crouched near her, the shape of a man cut in silence. His hair was long, dark against the sky. His eyes, when she dared look up, weren't kind exactly, but they weren't cruel either. He didn't touch her. Instead, he pulled a canteen from his belt and set it beside her hands. Then he walked away. Her fingers shook as she unscrewed the cap and drank. Water spilled down her chin, cool and alive. Her stomach clenched, grateful and angry all at once. When she looked again, he had returned, with something in his arms. A blanket, a bundle, a shape that smelled faintly of cedar. He laid it beside her and gestured, not harsh, but firm. Rest. She didn't argue. Couldn't. Sleep came in waves, broken by the dull throb in her ribs and the soft rustle of the wind. But the pain faded, slowly, under the weight of exhaustion. And in its place, something else settled. A question she didn't yet know how to ask. She woke to firelight. The world was smaller now, warmer. She lay beneath a buffalo hide, the fire crackling a few feet away. He sat across from her, carving a small piece of wood with a bone-handled knife. The motion was rhythmic, deliberate. He didn't look at her. She didn't speak. Words felt heavy. Instead, she watched the lines of his face, the scars that traced his jaw like old rivers. A warrior, that much was clear. But there was something quieter there too. Something she hadn't expected. She shifted, wincing, and he glanced up. "You should not move," he said, voice low, almost hoarse. "You speak English," she murmured. He gave a slight nod. "Enough." "Why?" She stopped. The question felt too big, too stupid. She tried again. "You could have left me." He didn't answer. The fire cracked, casting their shadows long across the canvas of the shelter. Outside, the wind howled like it remembered something old. She closed her eyes, listening to it. The prairie never forgot. Blood soaked into this land and stayed there. She thought of her husband. The way his smile had turned thin the closer they came to Wyoming territory. The way he stopped touching her after the child had quickened. He'd grown quiet, then cruel. She told herself it was the stress, the hunger, the failed promises. But truth had a shape, and it had lived in his eyes for weeks before he finally acted. A man doesn't walk out into the wild without a plan. A woman doesn't carry life unless she's willing to fight for it. When she opened her eyes again, the man across the fire was watching her. Not with hunger, not with pity, just a steady kind of waiting. Like he was used to letting people decide who they wanted to be. "You got a name?" she asked. He looked back down at his carving. "Yes." Silence fell again, but it wasn't cold now. It filled the space between them like a third figure. She shifted onto her side, careful, protective of her belly. The baby stirred. Still alive. Still fighting. She exhaled. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once. "Rest. More walking tomorrow." "Where?" "Somewhere safer than here." Her fingers closed around the edge of the hide. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But something in his voice, stone calm, neither demanding nor soft, settled her bones. The kind of man who didn't waste words, who knew death and chose not to deal it that day. She let sleep take her again. Outside, the wind swept over the plains, hissing through dry grass like a warning. Somewhere to the north, thunder muttered in the belly of the sky. And not far from their camp, boot tracks led in the opposite direction, disappearing into the dusk, leaving behind a woman who refused to die and a child not yet born into a world that wanted neither. The fire crackled once more. He carved in silence, and the prairie held its breath. Morning light came filtered through thin hides stretched overhead, turning everything gold and rust red. Smoke from the cook fire coiled low, mixing with the scent of damp earth and roasted corn. She stirred beneath the buffalo blanket, slower now, but stronger. The ache in her body had dulled into something manageable, like old sorrow buried just beneath the skin. Her eyes found him again, sitting just outside the shelter, sharpening a blade with smooth, practiced strokes. He hadn't spoken since last night, but he hadn't left either. She sat up with care, a hand on her belly. The child moved again, steady this time, like it trusted her, like it had hope. He glanced back at her, nodded once, then pointed toward a stone bowl where something thick and steaming waited. She crawled to it slowly, spooned some into her mouth. It was bland, earthy, made of cornmeal and boiled beans, but it filled her. Strength bloomed in her chest, small and certain. "You didn't have to help me," she said again, voice still gravel-thin. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Nobody helped my wife." His words were simple, but they cracked like bone under pressure. She lowered the spoon. The air between them shifted, no longer filled with wariness, but with something heavier, recognition. What happened to her? He wiped the blade, slid it into a sheath of rawhide. She was taken. Fort soldiers. They burned our village. Said it was a mistake. She was not a mistake. The wind picked up, brushing over the prairie with a sigh that felt ancient. The pain in his voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It sat in his chest like a buried stone. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. He didn't respond, only stood and offered her a hand. She took it. His grip was warm, calloused, solid. No words passed between them as they broke camp, but she could feel something beginning, like two storms moving toward the same sky. They walked for hours. The plains gave way to scrub, then low hills scattered with birch and cottonwood. She moved slower than him, often pausing to catch her breath. He never hurried her, never looked back in impatience, just paused at intervals and waited, face unreadable, eyes always scanning the horizon. By midday, they reached a small rise. Below it lay a scattering of shelters, animal hide tents surrounded by tall grass and carefully stacked firewood. Children darted between smoke trails, their laughter sharp and sudden like birds taking flight. Women bent over cook fires, skin leathered by sun and wind. A few men looked up as they approached, hands hovering near weapons. She felt their eyes rake over her, her pale skin, her torn dress, the roundness of her belly. The man at her side said nothing, but his presence alone seemed to still them. One of the older women approached and spoke to him in Cheyenne. Her voice was stern, her gaze even sterner. The woman's eyes landed on her belly and narrowed. The warrior answered softly. Whatever he said quieted her. The old woman clicked her tongue, motioned toward a small tent on the edge of camp. It looked newer than the others. The hide still pale, the seams fresh. She followed him there. Inside, the space was clean, bare but dry. A woven mat. A low fire pit ringed with smooth stones. It smelled of sweet grass and tobacco. She knelt slowly, careful not to disturb the child within. "You live here?" she asked. He shook his head. "You do." That stopped her. "You built this for me?" He nodded once. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. The silence between them had begun to feel like something alive. Not hostile, but honest. Later that night, she heard voices outside. Low clipped. Men speaking in Cheyenne, their tones tense. She caught one word repeated, Wasiku. White woman. She pulled the blanket tighter around her. She could feel their distrust, like a wind pressing in from all sides. She didn't blame them. Not after what her kind had done to theirs. The flap rustled and the warrior entered, crouching near the fire pit to rekindle the coals. His shoulders were tight, his hands moving slower than usual. "They don't want me here, do they?" she asked quietly. He didn't lie. "Some are afraid. Some are angry. They've lost people to your people." "I didn't ask to be saved," she said, harsher than she meant. "You didn't ask to be left either," he replied. That shut her up. They sat in silence for a long while, the fire painting warm lines on the wall. Finally, she whispered, "My husband said the child wasn't his. But he was lying. He just wanted out. He wanted a new start without the weight of me." The warrior looked at her, his eyes steady. "Then, he is less than the wind." She almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. It felt good just to have someone say it, without judgment, without pity. She touched her belly. "I thought the baby would ruin us. I didn't think it could ever save me." Outside, the village settled into its nighttime rhythm, murmurs, soft cries of children, the steady hush of wind in the grass. She lay back on the mat, feeling more exhausted than she had since waking in the dirt. He remained seated by the fire, carving again. This time the wood took shape slowly, gentle curves, a figure bending over something small. She watched him until her eyes could no longer hold themselves open. Just before she drifted off, she spoke once more. "You got a name?" He didn't answer right away. Then softly, just above the crackle of flame, "I do." And nothing more. She smiled faintly in the dark, unsure why that mattered, only knowing it did. Sleep took her, without fear for the first time in weeks. The sounds of the camp tucked her in, voices low, drums of the earth beneath her. And the last thing she heard was the wind changing direction. Outside, under the wide dome of stars, something was moving. Not danger. Not peace either. Something in between. And whatever it was coming closer. Night in the village did not sleep. It breathed, slow, steady, aware. Crickets throbbed in the grass. Firelight flickered against the curve of hide walls. Somewhere a child cried and was hushed with a lullaby older than memory. She lay beneath her blanket, staring at the ceiling of her borrowed home, heart pulsing hard against her ribs. The nightmares had returned. She'd seen her husband's face again. Not the man she'd married. Not the man who had made her laugh beneath the Missouri stars. This face had hollow eyes and a crooked smile, like a wolf playing shepherd. In the dream, he'd been holding her hand, gently, tenderly, then tightening his grip until her bones cracked. She woke gasping, hand on her belly, soaked in cold sweat. She didn't cry out. The village didn't need more reasons to fear her presence. At first light, she stepped outside. The warrior was already awake, tending to a low fire. He handed her a strip of dried meat, still warm. No words passed between them, but his eyes lingered on her face a second too long. He saw the shadows there. "I dreamed of him," she said after a long silence. "He said I wasn't worth the trouble, that if I lived, I'd come back for revenge." The warrior nodded. "He fears you then." "I don't know if it's fear or guilt. Same root, same rot." She chewed the meat, its flavor sharp and smoky. He sat beside her, not close, but not distant either. The warmth between them had changed, not softened, but deepened. She was no longer just someone he'd pulled from the dust. She was part of a landscape now, a stitch in the torn fabric of his world. Later that day, she walked through the village for the first time without him. Mothers watched her with narrowed eyes. Children stared, some with curiosity, others with fear. A boy threw a rock, not hard, but hard enough to sting. She didn't flinch, didn't retaliate, just kept walking. She understood their suspicion. She bore the same skin as the men who'd taken their land, their lives, their children. Her presence was a scar they didn't want to reopen. That evening, he returned with blood on his shirt, a wound near his shoulder, clean but deep. She reached for him instinctively. "What happened?" she asked, voice sharp. "Hunter's trap. Meant for wolves." "You're not a wolf." "Not always." She cleaned the wound with warm water and willow bark. Her hands didn't tremble. His eyes didn't leave hers. He hissed once as she sewed the skin closed with sinew. Still no complaint, just a grunt and a long breath. "You've done this before," she said. "Many times. For others. For myself." When she was done, she sat back and stared at the fire, breathing deeply. The scent of blood and bark hung thick in the air. "You lost your wife to the bluecoats. I lost myself to a man who looked like me but had no soul left." He looked at her then, eyes lit with something unreadable. "She made me believe in the world again. After her, I tried to disappear. But the land doesn't let you. It keeps whispering." "What does it whisper to you now?" "That you're not finished." The next morning, trouble found them. A rider came into the village. A man with a broad face and narrow eyes, white like her, but dirtier, meaner. His voice was loud, mocking, and his horse skittish. He dismounted with a smirk, walked straight up to her, without invitation. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "You're still breathing." She froze. The warrior appeared from behind her before she could respond, silent and dangerous. The man sneered. "Easy there, chief. Just saying hello to a friend. Ain't that right, darlin'?" Her voice didn't shake. "You rode with my husband." "Rode, drank, fought, lied. All of it. He's got men now. Real men. Not scavengers like these." The warrior stepped forward. "You speak poison. Leave." But the man didn't move. He looked her up and down. "He'll come for you, you know. He thinks you're his property. Said you were carrying a bastard. Wants to correct that mistake." Her stomach turned to ice. The warrior's hand twitched near his knife. "You should go," she said. The man chuckled. "See you soon, sweetheart." He rode out like he owned the wind. They didn't speak for a long time after. The village buzzed with unease. The women whispered. The elders gathered. Children were kept inside. That night, she sat beside the warrior near the fire. Her hands were clasped tight over her stomach. Her heart beat faster than it should have. "He's coming." "Yes." "He'll try to kill me." "Yes." "And you?" "I'll stop him." She shook her head slowly. "Why would you risk that?" He stared into the flames. "You carry more than a child. You carry a story not yet finished." She turned to him. "I don't want anyone to die for me." His eyes met hers. "Then live. That is harder." The fire popped, sending sparks into the night. She rose early the next day. The sun was a red smear behind a veil of cloud. She stood at the edge of the camp, staring north. She could feel it, something dark coming. Not just men with guns, but the weight of what they represented. Her past, her shame, her fear. The warrior joined her, his presence solid calm. "When they come," she said, "I won't hide." He nodded. "Then we stand." Behind them, the village watched. Not enemies anymore. Not quite allies. But something like witnesses. In the distance, a horse cried out, sharp, panicked. Then, another. A riderless horse staggered into the camp, foam on its lips, and a message carved into its side with a knife. "She dies at sunrise." The camp went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She stood unmoving, one hand on her belly, the other clenched at her side. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. The horizon bled red as dawn broke, a smear of fire against the low black spine of the earth. Fog clung to the grass in hushed wisps, and the prairie braced for violence. The village stood silent, no cooking fires, no chatter of children. Only waiting. She stood at the edge of camp, rifle in hand, breath misting in the cold. Her belly felt heavy with both child and dread, but her spine did not bend. The warrior stood beside her, a knife strapped to his side, bow in hand, eyes narrowed toward the trees that swayed in the eastern wind. They were coming, and she would not run. No more hiding. No more hoping someone else would save her. Her hands, though pale and trembling, were her own. And today, they would hold the line. The first rider appeared just after the sun breached the ridge, alone at first, then two more flanking him like shadows. Their horses trotted slow, deliberate. Men who weren't afraid of the ground they covered. Her husband led them, reins loose in one hand, a long-barreled pistol in the other. His hair was longer now, face more sun-split, but she recognized the swagger, the smirk that never reached his eyes. He pulled his horse to a stop a few paces short of the camp's edge. His gaze found her like it had never left, and he smiled. "Hell," he called out, "I thought I buried you already." She didn't answer, didn't flinch. His eyes flicked to the warrior. "That your new keeper? You've got a talent for leeches." The warrior said nothing. His silence was louder than the wind. "I've come to collect what's mine," her husband said. "You, the brat. And whatever dignity you've still got hiding under that hide tent. If you come quiet, I won't burn the village." "You left me to die," she said, her voice clear. "You were slowing me down," he replied, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. "You, and that parasite inside you." The child kicked, sharp and sure. She didn't blink. "You won't touch this child," she said. He leaned forward in the saddle. "You going to stop me? You and your wood-carving savage." The warrior stepped forward then, bow raised. "Turn around." The pistol lifted slowly. A twitch of a smile. "You'll lose." The world cracked open with the sound of a gunshot. The warrior spun backward from force, his shoulder jerking, blood spraying across the dirt like spilled ink. She screamed and dropped to her knees beside him as his bow clattered from his hand. But he wasn't down. He gritted his teeth, pushed himself upright with one hand, and nodded to her. "They miss," he muttered. Behind them, the camp erupted. From behind brush and tent, Cheyenne warriors emerged, silent and fast, arrows loosed before the riders could reload. The man to her husband's left fell instantly, a shaft buried in his chest. The other dismounted and ran. He was struck down before he reached cover. Her husband stayed mounted, spurred the horse, and barreled toward her. She raised the rifle. Her hands didn't shake. He shouted something, but she didn't hear it. The world narrowed to his eyes, those cold, lying eyes, and the child inside her who had waited too long for justice. She fired once. He slumped sideways and hit the dirt hard. The horse kept running without him. Everything stopped. No gunfire. No screaming. Just the wind again. The smell of smoke. The rustle of grass returning to life. She stood over him. His face twisted in the dust, mouth open, blood soaking his shirt. Still breathing barely. She stared down at him. He looked up at her, eyes full of something bitter. "I never wanted you," he croaked. "I know," she said. "That's why I lived." She didn't finish him. She didn't have to. The land would take care of that. She turned back to the warrior, who was seated now, shoulder-wrapped, blood still seeping through the cloth. He looked at her, pain in his face, and something else. Pride. "You fight," he said. "I had to," she replied. "No," he said. "You chose to." The women of the camp emerged slowly, gathering in a wide ring. The old woman who had once questioned her touched her arm and nodded. No words passed. None were needed. By midday, the smoke had cleared. The bodies were gone, carried out and buried with no ceremony. The warrior rested in her tent, eyes closed, breath steady. She sat beside him, carving a piece of wood in her lap, a habit she'd picked up, one she didn't yet understand but found comfort in. The child moved again, not restless this time, just present, like it knew peace had arrived. That night, the stars came out without clouds. She stood outside, looking up at them, wrapped in a fur shawl. The air was cold, but not cruel. Behind her, she heard footsteps. The warrior joined her, shoulder bandaged, a new scar forming. He handed her a small wooden figure, a mother holding a child. Rough, but beautiful. She took it without a word. "I thought I had nothing left to protect," he said. "Then I found you." She looked at him. "And I thought I had no one left to believe in. Until you didn't leave." They stood together in silence, side by side. Two scars made flesh, both stitched into something stronger. When the baby came 2 weeks later, it was in the dead of night, in the same tent she'd first opened her eyes in. Pain racked her like a flood, and the old woman delivered the child with swift hands and murmured prayers. The warrior waited outside the whole time, pacing in circles. When they handed him the child, wrapped in buffalo hide and damp with the effort of living, he didn't smile. But his hands didn't tremble either. They named the child something soft, something spoken only between them. No one else needed to know. And when they stood together at the edge of the village one final time, the wind brushing over them, the sun warm on their faces, she whispered to the land that had once tried to kill her, "I came from nothing, but I made something." The land didn't answer. It didn't need to.